Hi, True Crime Grapevine fans. It's me, Patty Lee, and I'm here with today's True Crime Headlines because there is too much crime and not enough time. So I'll watch all of it for you, and I've got you covered. I'll let you know what is on the True Crime Grapevine, all the gossip, all the allegations and shade for what's happening daily. So today is Wednesday, September 6th. What's been going on? Whew. Well, it's a hot one, both in on the grapevine and weather-wise. So if you got anything nice and cold to drink, join me in a cup, and let me tell you what all the gas on the grapevine is. Number one, everybody's talking about Becky Hill. Oh, what was that? What was there was an old record album. And if you don't know, sorry, I'm Patty Lee. I'm going to look up quickly. Oh, The Education of Lauryn Hill. uh, there was a rap album called, or R&B album called The Education of Lauryn Hill. This week, or today at least, could be called The Education of Rebecca Hill. Oh, Miss Becca Hill, she's getting educated. And kind of like how Ruby Frank would educate her. If you know, hashtag if you know, you know. What do I mean by that? So Frankie, we'll talk about her next. She's the 8 passengers Mormon mom out in Utah with Jody Hillebrand. That's the other big, huge story besides our Pennsylvania convict. Okay, that's it. That's the three I'm going to be talking about. But first, the education of Miss Becky Hill. Becky Hill is the clerk of courts for Carlton County. You may have heard of it. That sounds familiar because that's where Alec Murdaugh's murder trial for his wife Maggie and son Paul was held, specifically in the town of Waterboro, South Carolina. So let me just sum up for you what everybody's talking about. There's all these legal people telling you that there's probably going to be a new trial because of jury tampering, and there probably will be. And it has nothing to do with guilt or innocence, which sounds crazy to non-legal people. But just the big takeaway from this is don't hold. This is why they moved juries. This murder trial was such a huge deal, and they held it in a teeny tiny town, which there's nothing wrong with teeny tiny towns, but there was so much pressure on this case, and the locals, um, everybody said maybe they'd be afraid of the Murdaughs, but they hated them. Like everybody, they were under their thumb. They were running the town. The police, they had the police on the payroll, allegedly, was the story. So I don't know about you, but everybody that I spoke with and heard pretty much had decided, except for lawyers, that Alec Murdaugh was guilty. He was obviously he's a liar about everything. Of course, he did this too. Now, you can go back to my playlist to see. I was more with Peter Tragos about what actually was going on. And I think I, like the egg lady, just wasn't sure. I was torn because there was so much. Like, obviously, he's a bad dude. I mean, admittedly, he said, I'm a liar, I'm a cheat, I F over people. So murder doesn't seem like too far different, right? But in the actual trial, there were things that were a little, that just left a little, like you wanted just a little bit more. Anyway, why do I say this is the education of Becky Hill? And why is everybody talking about Becky Hill? Becky Hill was a clerk of courts in this very small little town. And apparently she enjoyed a very close relationship with the judge and probably all the judges. But Judge Newman really seemed to trust her. And why do I say that? I mean, why wouldn't he? The clerk of courts is an elected position, and this is the person that like takes paperwork back and forth, is the, in her own words, liaison between the judge, the defense, the prosecution, the jury. They're the person sort of, it's like the circus, the leader of the circus. What's it called? Like a three-ring circus, ringmaster. So while the judge is obviously the judge, he can't do all the paperwork and walk people over and explain things to everybody and be grabbing everything from everybody. That's what the clerk of courts does. And they have an office that organizes all the paperwork. Um, she helps the bailiff let the like doing things with the jury, letting know if the jury needs things to tell the judge. So the go-between. She is to not take sides, or he, whoever is the clerk of courts. They are just to help the court run legally and efficiently. So why do I say that there's the education of Becky Hill's coming? Well, you may have heard she wrote a book months after, like 4 months it was out after the trial had been over. So it kind of seems like maybe it had been in the works while the trial was going on, which kind of makes one wonder, like, so if it was a hung jury, or like that probably wasn't going to lead to a book ending, so maybe that wouldn't be so great for anybody writing a book. That aside, two important things we learned that people are talking about in documents. These are not he said, she said things. These are not, well, the jury's just saying, is this real? These are things that the judge said on the record about Becky Hill. So let me tell you, I'm going to need my little, well, maybe I don't need my reading glasses. We'll see. So, number one, I don't know if you remember this. It was just a little blip in the beginning, which seemed weird. But the jury had picked a foreman. That's when the jury goes back and they pick somebody that's going to be their like spokesperson, right? Apparently, Becky Hill didn't, she somehow spoke to the judge about the choice, and then the judge selected the foreman, not the foreman that the jury selected. The judge chose somebody different. Now, that somebody different is the person that four jurors, three in their own words and one through a paralegal taking their statement, intimated that she and Rebecca Hill spoke a lot privately. They would go into a bathroom by themselves. So it's weird that the judge, but it's weird, but it's not weird. So again, anybody from a small town? I grew up in a small town. It is not surprising that the judge, this is his like right hand man slash woman who does everything from his court. He trusts Becky's opinion. She runs the court with him. She, if she thinks something's hinky or off sides or weird, or she gets a bad feeling, he probably listens to her because they work together, and he wouldn't think she had any bias or whatever. And he probably shouldn't listen to her because she's not the judge. But again, small town, people know each other for years, they trust each other. That is why very small towns can be great. If you have a problem, everybody comes together, no questions asked. But for things that have to remain like very specific and rule oriented, it can get hard because, well, I know so and so, so why wouldn't I listen to them? Yeah, I know I'm not like, but I know Becky. I trust Becky. Becky is impeccable taste. Maybe that's what Judge Newman was saying. But anyway, so for some reason, Judge Newman selected a different foreperson. Allegedly, it's because Becky let him know that maybe who they were picking wasn't appropriate for some reason. But all we know is that they picked a jury foreperson, and then the judge selected a new one. What we also know, not from prosecution or defense, just on the record, there was this issue of the egg lady. So who's the egg lady? This is juror, I think 760. What is her number? I don't know which number she was. Remember? But anyways, we're going to call her the egg lady. Why? Because when Judge Newman said that just to be safe, we're going to place an alternate in your place, and you're going to be dismissed from the jury. Just he said, just for an abundance of caution, he asked her if she left anything in the court room, the jury room, and she had left a dozen eggs that she had brought for somebody or gotten from somebody. But anyway, so people referred to her as the egg lady because she had left. That was one of the things she needed to get from the jury room was her purse and a dozen eggs. So the egg lady said that, well, she didn't say anything. She had been dismissed right as the jury was going in to deliberations, I believe, or right as the defense was going to be presenting their case. But at a very, no, I think it was right before deliberations. Yeah, because she had gone to Moselle on March 1st and she was dismissed off the jury March 2nd. So what had happened was on the record, there was this discussion about this Facebook post that Becky Hill was aware of and told the judge about that she read on Facebook on the Waterboro, South Carolina word of mouth Facebook page. So we all know about Facebook, right? And personally, I'm not on the next neighbor. I'm not on I'm not going to gossip about people on the internet. And come on, that's what a lot of that devolves into, right? So she said, I saw this post and it was by this juror's ex-husband. How do you know this juror? And then she goes, well, because I got this email from somebody else who said she had also been talking. I mean, Becky had a lot of information about this juror talking about the case, which nobody else could corroborate, which the person who actually, there was, somebody said they posted something that they posted it drunk, but their post was made prior to when Becky Hill had seen it. And so it couldn't have been the day she said she saw it, like February 24th. They had written something on the 16th and took it down. So there was no way that was what she was talking about. And that guy's name was Timothy Stone. Egg Lady's husband was Tim Stone. Tim Stone was contacted and said, I never heard about any of this. I never wrote anything. He allowed the defense to their investigator to download his Facebook history. So here's the thing. Whether it's because Becky wanted she kept saying too, they needed to come to the right answer. And this is just, I'm not kidding you. In camera, so in camera is when the judge goes into his chambers and looks at something in camera, like nobody else sees it. He's looking at something evidentiary in front. His words are still recorded for the record, but it's the jury. It's outside the jury. So he actually said, after talking about this Facebook post, he said, oh boy, I'm not too pleased about the clerk interrogating a juror as opposed to coming to me and bringing it to me. Okay, so what he's referring to is the egg lady had said that this that the clerk of courts had been talking about a number of things, and a number of these jurors' affidavit that we talked about yesterday said she brought up like stuff about the trial, which we all heard. You don't talk about anything about your deliberation to trial. And she was asking him, oh, would you think that? How'd that go? Don't trust this. That's all alleged, those statements. But this was the judge on the record saying that he wasn't too happy that the clerk of courts interrogated one of the jurors before bringing it to him. And what he was referring to is the egg lady said that that Becky had asked her, like, well, I heard your husband posted this and he said you were talking, and was that true? And were you talking? Heard you were talking about the case, and how are you thinking about the case? And how are you leaning? And what do you think? And the thing is, this juror wasn't sure, or she didn't want to tell the clerk of courts if she was sure one way or the other. So she said, I don't know. And she saying, I don't know. And then all of a sudden this Facebook post comes up, and then the judge wants to talk about it. And then he needs to talk about, well, he's going to think about it. And then the next day he's like, out of abundance of caution, I think we're going to have to dismiss you. That was the person who could have hung the jury. So here's the deal. Becky seems to be really tight with the judge. The judge trusts her, it appears, my opinion. Don't sue me. Why is Becky trying to change the foreman? Why is she trying to get a juror taken off? that's beside all the stuff that people said. She said, like, don't pay attention to the defense. They're just trying to lie to you. Look at his crocodile tears. And then when they were deliberating, and this was from people, Egg Lady was gone during deliberations. People during deliberations were saying, well, she wouldn't let us go for a smoke break until we had an answer. I mean, they came up within 3 hours. Besides all that, in this book, she wrote, apparently, she also gave the jurors reporters' cards. She was telling them they were going to become famous after the verdict. She arranged for them as a group to be interviewed by the like television people outside. She sort of became like the representative liaison with them. She went to New York to be on Good Morning America with them. So somehow she became like a PR person almost. I don't know. It's really, again, really small town. And she's clerk of courts. So she has this authority position, and they think, well, she's part of the court. That's part of the problem. So this is not to say that anybody thinks Alex is completely innocent, but he probably will get a new trial, according to all the lawyers, because this woman inserted herself. And then she wrote a book. Nobody would have known about anything except she wrote a book and told half. It's just crazy. So, like the education of Lauryn Hill. This is the education of Becky Hill. Becky Hill, who never got on an airplane. I am not well traveled, and I'm not quite a country girl, but I'm not continental or sophisticated. And let me just tell you, her first plane ride was from South Carolina to New York City for that. This was her big chance, you know. The person that she wrote the book with was a reporter. So what kind of relationship did she have with the reporter during the trial? And is someone working for the county as a court person who's supposed to maintain, you know, non-bias, reporting for somebody? That's like being a journalist. That you shouldn't be. That's, I mean, it's great for that journalist that she got them the inside track, but that's really not cool. Again, but we're in a small town. Same reason that Alec Murdaugh got, and his whole family could get away with whatever they got away with, all the financial crimes that he admitted to. His life of debauchery, allegedly. You know, it was because he lived in a really small town. Big fish, small pond, enough money, and but cuts both ways. Real small city, everybody knows each other. Judge trusts his clerk of courts, listens to her implicitly, even when he should not be allowing her. The fact that he knew she interrogated a juror, that is jury tampering. You can't interrogate jurors in the middle of a trial. You can't. That's jury tampering right there. So she done effed up. Again, though, small town. Again, this to me just says why this trial needed to be gotten out of that teeny tiny county, because all those people know everybody. It's too small. It's too incestuous, but not in the way, like, I'm not saying sexually, but I mean, everybody knows everybody. She in her book admitted that her granddaddy knew the granddaddy of the Murdaughs. I mean, like, the fact that everybody in the court knows everybody who's on trial intimately, that's why you move it to a bigger venue. So the judge and the clerk of courts, like the Judge Newman, could have gone into a courthouse. So he would have been still from Carleton County, but he would have gone into a courthouse in, let's say, Columbia, and he wouldn't have had like a long-term relationship with this clerk of courts that he knew so well that she could tamper with the jury just a little bit and he'd ignore it. But that is on the record. So if you're mad that Alec Murdaugh gets a second bite at the apple, you can talk to Becky Hill and Judge Newman, because even though they didn't mean to. I'm not saying nobody's saying that this is a big, you know, there are people going, oh, the Murdaughs, maybe they paid her to what? Get a guilty verdict? No, that makes no sense. The one lady, she got kicked off the jury was the one lady who, when she's questioning her, was saying, I don't know. I can't say if he did it or not. I don't know. That's like some weird 3D chess that makes no sense to me. So that is what everybody is talking about in the interwebs. All the lawyers and the regular people. Everybody's like, Murdoch's gonna. It's not fair. We know he's a killer. Again, this is about our justice system, and she screwed up. And the judge kind of seems to have. I mean, I know everybody loves Judge Newman, and it's not about liking him. It's about, look, if you know that your clerk of courts interrogated a juror, that is jury tampering, and you got to start over. And he probably didn't. There was so much pressure on him, on that town, on that county, to not do anything that made it look like they were giving Alex Murdaugh any help because of the reputation. And instead, it looks like they bent over so far backwards that they violated his rights to a fair trial. So, sometimes you can't win. All right, so the next thing, 8 passengers. Ruby Franke, Jody Hillebrand. Neighbors are talking. They said, we saw those kids out this summer at one point. We haven't seen them a lot. Past like a year, they've seen them less and less. The mom did paper over the windows. The kids were out in the yard in 100-degree heat. And one neighbor was like, yeah, I went inside because I couldn't. I was gardening. I was pulling weeds. I couldn't take it. They were out there still. We know Ruby Franke is very strict, as in child papoose, let's see, instead of, CA, we were calling it, I guess, on YouTube. It's not, it goes beyond. I mean, her idea of punishment often had to do with physical pain and suffering. And have you heard of people who, I'm not going to say the word right, flagellate, they smack it's like monks sometimes did it. They would use like a cat of nine tails or a bunch of like whip things, and they would smack themselves as they walked along, and their backs would be bleeding, and it was to get closer to God. Flagellation, self-flagellation. It's like suffering is good, and Ruby really felt that her two youngest especially were they acted entitled. I think that's what she meant, was they were happy kids who acted like, yeah, I deserve to eat, I deserve to have friends. She really wanted them locked down away from the world's evils. And in her new partner, Jody, not partner, sorry, business partner, Jody Hillebrand, yeah, we're hearing all kinds of things. So the neighbors are now talking more about Ruby Franke's kids and what was happening at the house, while we're hearing now from old patients and people who had Jody Hillebrand as a therapist. So right now, their Mormon Stories podcast has a live going. I'm missing it, so I'll have to watch it on replay, with a professional who has knowledge of the therapeutic issues of Jody Hillebrand. And that's from a Mormon perspective, which is kind of interesting, because when you talk about high demand, high control groups, a lot of that can be described in fundamentalist and more, even if they're not, I don't want to say fundamentalist FDL, because that's a specific branch splinter of the Mormon church, but people who are practicing regular Mormonism, but more fundamentally, like Ruby, this plays into this therapy, I guess. And what this woman does to the people that came to her, like divide and conquer, it sounds like, allegedly, don't sue me. And Hidden True Crime has on a guest who, a victim of Jody Hillebrand. So again, I think it's important. Hidden True Crime, Lauren Matthias, and her husband, who's a criminal psychologist, but Lauren is a journalist, but they're from Idaho. And I believe she grew up Mormon, but doesn't practice. But they understand it. But the Mormon Stories podcast, he is an excommunicated Mormon, but he's had a podcast since 2005. I highly recommend it if you want to understand sort of the contextualization of the scary thing is, even I don't know about Jody Hillebrand. I don't know their hearts, obviously, but Ruby Frankie could seriously, psychologically, been thinking she was doing the right thing, but kind of like how Lori Vallow, we can't believe that they could self-delude themselves into like hurting their children was good for them because it was getting them closer to God and it, suffer the little children. But I am telling you, it's easier to believe that they're just bad people, you know, versus that they could have a delusion, a manipulation of their mind where they go from being very strictly something to all the way over into like sadistic punishment and religious, maybe fervorism. I mean, definitely Lori Vallow was religious delusions. But I don't think Ruby Frankie is that different. Jody Hillebrand seems to want power, in my opinion, allegedly. This is all allegations and shade. Um, but people are saying that it seems to be more about power and control, the money, getting Ruby's followers. Because she had 2.3 million followers. That's millions of dollars in revenue if they all come and join the Connections podcast and YouTube channel, which I think is now taken down. But that's what everybody's talking about. So we'll find out if Alec gets a new trial due to the education of poor Rebecca Hill, who I kind of feel sorry for because I really don't think she was meaning to do anything wrong, but just did the wrong thing. We'll find out. Oh, the last thing is the Pennsylvania convicted murderer. Um, the big thing everybody's talking about is how he got out because there was the new warden. So the day after he escaped, the warden maybe had been going to quit anyways, but they had a new warden come in because there had been a convict who escaped in May. That convict, there was an alert within 5 minutes because the guard tower saw him. He had jumped up, gotten to a fence to get on the roof and ran over on the roof and off. So they'd put up more razor wire around the roof. Now, they this time the tower guard didn't see what was going on, and that person is on administrative leave. They're not saying if that person maybe fell asleep on the job or what happened, but also there were people playing basketball. There were a lot of people. It was yard time, like recess. And he's 5 foot. Daniela is 5 foot tall. This guy goes into this hallway, like he's with the basketball players, and he goes into this hallway, and it's shaded. It's hard to see a little bit, but then he puts his hand on one side. My kids used to climb up like this with their arms and feet inside a doorway, like a little spider. This guy used his arms and then his feet on the back, if you can imagine, and like bloop, 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 Spider-Man up the entrance into the prison where they'd go in. I mean, the fact that it was the building of it should be built, right? Because nothing should be like within 5 feet that somebody could. Do you know what I'm saying? You would think it would be wider than a body could span so that people couldn't do this. But anyways, yeah, he bloop, 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 Spider-Man'd it out. He went over the new razor wire, didn't, DJAF. He was gone, and they didn't find him missing because the guard tower didn't see him. So it wasn't, this happened at 8:15, and it wasn't until 9:35 that he was caught. So that guard tower in trouble. He is still on the run, but they say, again, they feel like they've got him caught in a certain perimeter area. But they've said that before. And we did find out one thing. In Brazil, he did have experience living off the land in the wooded areas. Now, he's not a trained military survivalist, but the fact that's how he's doing it. So he knows how to live off the land. So, but Pennsylvania, and then it's Delaware. He's on the East Coast. He's going to run into city. He's not going to have so much hidden wooded areas. And I do think it's very hot still. I think he's going to get caught. So, what do you think? It would be great if you're watching this, if you could like or subscribe. You can come back tomorrow. I am here for you to relay the day's true crime headlines every day. I'm Patty Lee of the True Crime Grapevine, and I will see you tomorrow. Stay safe. Don't go into the woods alone. Watch your six.